everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and we are on location today with Raf Grassetti. Raf, we've done interviews before at places like Monsterpalooza, but now we're in your domain, your place of work. Where are we right now?
We're at the studio, Santa Monica studio, yeah.
We're at Santa Monica studio, because your day job, you are the art director of God of War Ragnarök.
Yes, you're finally here.
All the interviews we did at Monsterpalooza was so we could get here and chat with you about this. And obviously it's a massive game coming out with Kratos, Atreus, these characters returning from the fan favorite franchise, new characters as well. Today I wanted to talk about character design, because
that's what we do.
That's what you do, right? The process of character design, how do you take these iconic characters that, you know, if for a new generation of console, for a new story that you're telling, have it be familiar, bring something new to it, and then have them work well with the new characters as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work from a lot of people to get these characters ready, you know, to prime time, but bringing them from 2018, there was a lot of work done to get them to where they are. Kratos being so iconic to the franchise, we did a lot of work to get his new costume, his new look, the beard, everything. So going into Ragnarok, like we knew it was a continuation from the story. So we wanted to really show kind of, you know, he has been through the years that in between the games. And then same thing for Atreus. I mean, he's kind of growing up. So a lot of work went into developing his new costume, his new look. And then when we talk about characters, I mean, the game has so many different characters, like so many enemies, bosses, new heroes and all that stuff. So there's a lot of work that goes into developing the universe, expanding the races, building the weapons, environments, just everything, right? It's a massive effort from the team. Yeah, early in the game, we do a lot of exploration on things that we wanted to be in the game. So we're looking at a lot of like, this is very early, like trying to get a feel of like, you know, environments and kind of the scenario and kind of the, you know, kind of the look and the vibe for the game. Mm-hmm. And then we start going into like moments, like when we're trying to pitch the story, there's a lot of little cool moments that we want the team to like have a, you know, experience it before we make it. Yeah. So we do a lot of like key moments that, you know, maybe or may not make the final game, but we like to explore. And then we start to explore personalities. Like this is Thor, you know, like his personality on like
some type of beer, a drink. He's just casually flinging the hammer around.
Exactly, yeah. We knew he was, you know, be like a drunk type of character. So kind of get the feeling of like what the character is. Same thing for here. Like this is a very cool moment of him and Kratos. And like we want to get that tense feel in the image, and then hopefully we can recreate that in the game.
When you work on familiar characters, let's start with Kratos, Atreus, right? You guys did so much work, like you said, for 2018 to define this new series of the story. What's the goal going into this game in terms of the character design? Is it new for newness sake? Is it story? Is it for combat? Is it tied into gameplay? You know.
Well, towards the end of the last game, we knew that Ragnarok was coming, right? And kind of see the effect that they had on the environment. So we, you know, when we talk about these characters, we knew they were kind of surviving. They're trying to makeshift armors from what they had. So they're kind of like isolated, really trying to train for what's to come. So starting the game, you can kind of tell that from their costumes. There's a lot of work that went into, you know, the fabrication, like they were making it, the armor themselves. And then we go into specifics, so like each character has his own style. Atreus has a lot of, you know, kind of a little more style than Kratos. Like Kratos is like very rustic, like he just wants the practical stuff. So a lot of like all the metals are very specific to where he puts them for protection. Where Atreus is a little more, you know, kind of like the design's a little more fun for the artist to kind of play with his style. And as he's growing up as well, like he can kind of find his own little things that he can put on his armor, on his costume to make it, you know, make it his own.
And you're working alongside the creative team, the writing team, directors, and they've world built what these characters have gone through.
Yeah,
You want to present that visually.
Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth with the narrative design and the end design team of kind of where these characters are in the story right now and how we want to push them visually. And then for gameplay as well, there's a lot of like limitations of what things that we can do. They both upgrade their armor, same thing as last game. So as we're thinking throughout that progression as well, it's like how we want this to tell that story from the progression. There's a lot of little things that happens in the game that you can kind of tell from their armors, you know, where they get them from, you know, they kill a certain number of enemies to get a certain armor. So we can kind of do that storytelling as we develop their costumes. For not just these characters, but for everything. Like we're building factions of characters. We're building colors for these factions, and we really want the player to feel like everything came from somewhere in the game. If they're getting this medal, it's because it came from this realm, or same thing for, they have like this creature leather that came from this dragon, like things like that to build the universe.
Yeah, so that's not only where they are at the beginning of the game, but by the end of the game, where their characters have gone, where the players have taken them, and those will they bring out the emotion of the memories of playing the game.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're wearing the armor, we want the player to feel like, he kind of worked for it, and he kind of saw like where it came from, and be a part of that storytelling. Not every player is going to have the same armor towards the end of the game, so we can really tell the players when we're watching streams and we're watching people play the game, we can tell like where they
That's amazing.
Things that they did to get that armor.
Yeah. All right, new characters, and kind of a character that was alluded to in 2018. This is, of course, it's Thor. Thor, a character that's been represented many, many times in popular media. You guys had a rough, nebulous form for Thor. Was that at that point you knew what kind of the shape that Thor was going to be in, and how did that then change over time to what Thor is in this game?
That's a good question. I think Cory Barlog, the creative director of the game, he knew exactly kind of the feeling that he wanted the Thor to be from last game. So we only saw him for brief towards the end of the project. And then when we went into this game, like we had to take a step back and really flesh out what the character was going to be. We had a kind of overall silhouette from last game, but we didn't know exactly, how it was going to look, or the armor, and really his story throughout the game, right? Like there's a lot that goes into the inspiration for the armor, the Aesir, how they're building their costumes. And so it's more about all the gods, not just him. So when we get to him, there's meaning and there's reason for why he's wearing certain, pieces of gold, or the motifs of the costume. There's a lot of like Odin influence from being like his father. So as we're working through the cast, there's a lot of little things that we try to put on the costume.
Yeah, you mentioned silhouette and just having recognizable forms, so they're distinct and they tell a story in just the shape of themselves relative to the protagonists. And we got to talk about these right in front of us, because I see this is a 3D print, and that's a sculpture?
That's a clay sculpture from 2018.
And so talk about how these help the design process. And you did this print, you did this sculpture. Like, at what point did these come in to the collaboration with other part members of the team?
Yeah, I mean, the feeling of having something physical always has a huge impact on the buy-in for like what the characters are. So I love to do it even for myself, to try to understand the shapes, understand the weight of these characters. And it's something that's hard to get in 3D when you're starting to just sculpt on like a T-pose or something like that.
Yep.
So even just a little pose, or trying to get the personality through some of the sculpt, in bringing these to meetings, like you can get people behind the idea and really like start to pick things that are working and things that are not working. So then when we go into 3D, we can have a lot more back and forth on just finalizing these characters. And then this is from when we go into this game and working on Ragnarok. This is a 3D print of kind of the final design for him. We went through a lot of early explorations of what his costume could be. And kind of like what you mentioned, like this, when we reduce it to simple shapes, something that works not just for narrative moments, but for gameplay as well. Something you can look at from afar and really see, who the character is. Like when we're doing kind of a keyframe for a character, we're looking at the costuming, but everything that goes into like presenting the character is like very important. So like, where is the, standing behind it, or kind of the vibe of like, you can kind of see ravens and things like that, the environment that's behind them. So we treat these kind of final kind of key art for the characters as like a cover, so you could put these anywhere. But these are, some of the enemies that we have in the game, some of the heroes and companions and things like that. But you can kind of see the level of detail that we take some of even the enemies, right? They kind of, we're trying to kind of tell a little bit of the story, the fabrication of the armor. We try to pull from a lot of historical elements to make it believable. So there's a lot of thought that goes into like making them feel like a part of the universe. Yeah,
and it's not just the shape and the scale, but the armor and the weapons. The weapons are such a big part, right? So Thor with your guys' version of his Mjolnir hammer, which you also have in a kind of a one-to-one representation. So this is a product now, right? This is what it's going to be in the collector's edition. Yeah. You guys are involved in that as well. Is this derived from like that model?
Yeah. This is one-to-one to what we actually made it for the game. So sculpt done by Arda, and from design a lot of the early designs for the hammer. And the hammer is actually what we had in 2018 because we didn't see the character specifically, but there was a very close up on the hammer, so we had to go in and really design this as it was going to be for 2018 and for Ragnarok. But this is one-to-one to what we actually have in the game. So what the fans are getting is exactly what what Thor is holding. Yeah.
And it has the familiar iconography, right, which is like Kratos' Leviathan axe, and it's all part of that story. And as an artist, I guess with today's technology, you can put as much fidelity and detail in the ZBrush model.
Yeah,
and
there's no real limitations on things that we could do. It's just more time constraints and really the design, because sometimes we tend to put a lot of the details everywhere, so you gotta also have to push it back a little bit so it's readable from. But you can see, even this is like an earlier prototype, but you can really see all the details from the sculpt that it's what's in the game with normal maps, and everything is kind of one-to-one.
Yeah.
And to your point, like a lot of the design and the motif of this is the goats, so you can kind of see like all the antlers from the goats and kind of the goat heads, the two, being so important for kind of Thor's, from the mythology. There's a lot of things that we wanted to pull from that and then do our own take. Like if you look at his costume, there's a lot of the same designs. They're on the hammer, they're on his costume. Even here on the forearm, it's kind of like the Raven's designs on the forearm, kind of ping back on like what Odin has as well. So there's all these little details that we put in that it's there for fans to notice. And it's really what's in the game. It's just a lot of little things that sometimes you don't get to see just because of the crazy of fighting him.
Well, they have to serve a purpose of being a character, right? A boss or a playable character in the game, and all the requirements of it being on a big screen that someone's going to play it on. And you were telling me earlier that even with like scale, you're designing it so the hammer's a certain size relative to Thor when it's on his belt. That was the ideal scale. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. What you see here is what I wanted it to be, and what it feels right on his body. But obviously, when you're talking about gameplay, it needs to be bigger so it's readable. So when he throws, the player can see what's happening. So it's actually different scales for when he's holding it, and what's on his belt, and when he's throwing. So we do a little tricks like that to change kind of how the player perceives the weapon.
I can imagine, for a film, someone in the post-production facility, like enlarging props, right, for readability, which is all purpose. But you guys have to do it dynamically.
Yeah, exactly. And
have to do it because players can control and walk around, and that's not easy, but it is. These are like the little tricks and things that make it so memorable.
Yeah.
I mean, so much detail, and you ask who's going to notice, and of course the people that are going to notice are the prop makers and the cosplayers, because we've seen so many people build Leviathan axes, so many people do their versions of Kratos, whether it's like really building up to it or doing a gender bent version. And something you guys have put out is a cosplay costume guide. Can you talk about the process of that? And as a designer, you talk about materials now also?
Yeah, I mean, I love to see what cosplay. You guys did an amazing job with the Leviathan axe as well, and we love to see the cosplayers like going out and just building amazing things. I know how complex these things are, so when I see what people are actually making, it is like props to them, right? So this time we wanted to really put a lot of effort to give them as much as possible, give a lot of information, because we know it's really hard to find everything and then going in and just really trying to make it out yourself. And there's a lot of storytelling that goes behind it, like we were just talking about some of these details. And we want for people to know where we're coming from, what we're trying to do, for them to actually put that on their cosplay as well. Like, it is really hard to find these things and really hard to manufacture. So the people who are making want to make sure that they have everything they need to, kind of really go crazy and make these things as real as possible.
It's in that translation from 2D concept art to 3D, high textured 3D model to the physical world. That last translation is super difficult, because then you're talking about like real physics and real materials, and most people are, they're sculpting or using foam or cloth, but like they do amazing jobs making it look like leather and wood. And
metal, right?
Yeah,
like,
metal.
Absolutely. We can bend
yeah.
metals, and
right. These are the cheats that you can do in a game, really, for characters.
And to your point, like the materials are such a big thing for the franchise, just because we're always trying to build something that feels real, but it also has a huge fantasy element to it. So we look a lot into like real references from like historical props or like real leather, like in how people manufactured things back then. So when we started to look at these costumes, like we put a lot of thought into how someone would manufacture it. Of course, when you go into like dragon skin and like kind of crazy fantasy things, there's some liberty there, but we try to put a lot of thought into how stitching works and how things are actually made. So hopefully people can appreciate that when they're trying to build, and it's just not like nonsense.
Oh, I think they love the challenge. I mean, maybe they don't love it, but they definitely take on the challenge. Like more detail, they'll put it in the costume. And then just like you watching streamers recognizing the armor, you can go to a convention, look at someone in cosplay and say, wow, they pointed out, they love that detail from the cosplay guide, and they put it in their costume. And they capture the performance too.
Exactly, yeah. That's a huge part, because if people really like these characters, so when they take the time of their life to really spend like months building a costume to like cosplay these characters, this is the rewarding part of our job, to see people actually caring for these characters and appreciate the amount of work that we put on them, because we put the same, if not more, time into making these things, look the way they do.
Yeah, and it's something that's hopefully been an ongoing thing. More characters. I know they're probably fan favorites you have in mind when you're working on the game, and creating guides for those as well.
Yeah, we can't wait to see what the fans think is the coolest character, so that they want to cosplay, because that also, kind of influences our kind of thought process for the future, to know like we can double down into the fan favorites.
Well, congratulations on a long journey in getting the game made and having another iteration of the God of War franchise out there.
Thank you. Hope you can have time to play it and tell me what you think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Raf. Oh my God. I look at this, and the first thing I want to do is I want to put a light. I want to go, what does he look like, right? With in different lighting. And that's like the most immediate tactile thing. It's like, oh, where are the shadows cast on him? And
we can get a sense of like, things are feeling right, the weight's right.
Yeah.
And we can just kind of feel like the buy-in is like the most important thing. Like when people are happy with the design and they're kind of excited to work on it, like things move, really fast, and everybody puts their effort in.
And at some point, it goes into the world, and there are products and things that are other translations of the characters, and becomes its own creature.
I mean, me, I'm like, we're always trying to fight for products and like make these things collectibles.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit of us trying to sell. Like people want these characters, let's make them, right?
100%. I mean, it's so cool.
Yeah. And hopefully we can, there's a lot coming, so hopefully we can have people have these at their home as well.